Good morning, guys. Okay, so here's the deal. It is 11:30 in the morning, and I'm eyeballing this book right here. And what I figured I would do is I would read the beginning part with you, um, which is the prologue. It's a few pages long. And then I figured we could just go ahead and jump right into Follow Me Back by A.V. Geiger. Just a thought. Because I finished her last night, and I finished The Princess Doesn't Die in this one, and The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, or something like that. So all I have left out of the library books is this and these two. Cause your girl, she went hard with them library books. One second. So if you guys are ready, maybe take a second. I can pause it. Take a second, go grab yourself a cup of coffee. I am drinking Dunkin' Donuts pumpkin spice coffee. I went searching through my grocery store for this. I was so happy I found it. And then I also just ate a pumpkin roll for breakfast. So, grab yourself a cup of coffee and come join me for a short little reading. By the way, before we start, if anybody knows where to find the Beetlejuice the musical, please let me know. I would love to watch that. I'm a huge Beetlejuice fan. My grandmother got me introduced into Beetlejuice. Alright. And if you, for any chance, own the Memoirs and Misinformation by Jim Carrey and Dana Vacon, go ahead and open up and join us if you would like. So I'll give you a couple minutes. Let me gather myself, and we will get started. And like I said, we're just going to do the prologue, so you guys know a little bit more what the book's about, and that'll give it before we even get into the actual chapters of the book. So, let's get started. They knew him as Jim Carrey, and by the middle of that December, his lawn had burned to a dull amber brittle, and at night, after the sprinklers, 10 minutes of city ration watering, the grass blades floated in pooled water, limp and wasted like his mother's hair in the final morphine sweats. The city of Los Angeles had been moving hellward since April, with bone-dry reservoirs and strings of scorching days, the forecast reading like a sadist charm bracelet. 97, 98, 105, 103. Last week, an F-16 had flashed like a switchblade through the ash-filled sky just as one of the gardeners on the Hummingbird Road estate collapsed of sunstroke and fell into seizures. The man fought as they carried him to the house, saying the Virgin Mary had promised him a slow dance for $3 in the cool shade of the ravine. At night came the Santa Anas, those devil winds that sapped the soul, that set police sirens wailing as the sunsets burned through napalm oranges into city mobs. Then each morning a smoggy breath would draw across the canyons and into the great house, passing through air filters recently equipped with sensors to detect assassination by nerve gas. He was bearded and bleary-eyed after months of breakdown and catastrophe. He lay naked in his bed, so far from peak form that if you watched through a hacked security camera at this moment, you might barely recognize him, might at first confuse him with a Lebanese hostage. Then, in a swell of facial recognition, you'd realize this is no ordinary shut-in watching television alone on a gigantic bed. And as the blood-red Netflix logo glared from an unseen TV, you'd say, I know this man. I've seen him on everything from billboards to breakfast cereals. He's the movie star, Jim Carrey. Just weeks ago, 30 seconds of home security footage was leaked to The Hollywood Reporter by some traitor in his extended personal protection apparatus. In it, Carrey bobbed face down and fetal in his pool, wailing underwater like a captive orca. His publicist, Sissy Bosch, told Variety that he was preparing to play John the Baptist for Terrence Malick, who conveniently declined comment. The video sold for $50,000, a sum just large enough to inspire that most sacred of animal behaviors, a spontaneous market response. After the fifth paparazzo scaled his backyard fence, his security team had it raised to 15 feet, electrified, and fringed with razor wire, an $85,000 job, including the city council bribe. Jim had since begun to hear the sizzles and squeaks of electrocuted wildlife as a sorrowful necessity, animal sacrifice to his godhead. And while some believe Sissy Bosch's John the Baptist story, most noted that it didn't explain Carrie's weight gain, or why some heard a distinctly Chinese accent in his moanings. It was now 2:58 in the morning. He'd been watching television for 7 hours. The binge had started with an episode of Ancient Predators featuring Megalodon, the super shark terror of the ancient seas. Then came Cro-Magnon versus Neanderthal, the story of how these early humans parted as cousins on the African plains, then re-met as strangers in Europe, only to begin a contest of genocide. Cro-Magnon had slaughtered without mercy, leaving famished Neanderthal orphans staring out from French caves into a blizzard whose screaming whiteness, Jim knew, was that of total erasure. He was half French-Canadian and learned from the narrator that he carried Neanderthal DNA with him. He was descended from these orphans. Feeling their doom as his own, he'd begun crying tears of desolation, and then, unable to bear these, he'd hit pause with his grease-slicked thumb, freezing the screen on the tiny Neanderthal faces. For 10 minutes he lay trembling, muttering, "Oh, God," over and over, until Netflix, greedy for its own bandwidth, reset to the main menu, casting its red glow over him and his guard dogs, identical twins, steel-toothed Rottweilers, who both answered to Jafiel. Their name was shared for the sake of efficiency and emergency, so that if one of Jim Carrey's many enemies broke into the house, and he had only seconds to act, he could summon both with a breath. Fearing this was the moment when he would discover his own long-standing non-existence, questioning even the value of an existence as part of a species forever looping between horror and heartache. He wondered if the latest viral news story vexing his publicist was right. Had he actually died while snowboarding in Zermatt? He'd seen a YouTube video about how time behaves strangely in death, your final seconds distending, yielding rich washes of experience. What if he had died in recent days, arriving not in a hell or a heaven, but rather a bed-bound purgatory? He'd heard stories about the Los Angeles morgue. Yes, she actually did that. You made me lose my spot. He'd heard stories about the Los Angeles morgue, bored attendants taking gross pictures of the famous fallen, selling them to TMZ for down payments on houses in the valley. He flipped to YouTube, whose algorithms, like reading his mind, offered a montage of celebrity death photos, a shot of John Lennon, face puddled on a gurney, splayed out for the crowd. If they could do this to John Lennon. His mind now conjured an image of his own lifeless form, swollen and foul, the morgue goons standing above him, cameras blazing. Fuck. He breathed, unsure if he'd breathed it or not. He'd gone to the bathroom, trying to reclaim existential certainty with a warm rush of urine through his middle-aged urethra. His heart was racing. What if it failed in his sleep and they found him in the morning, caked in his own excrement? What if the entire flight of paranoia that had brought him to this moment of feared death was a premonition of a future death, the Zermatt snowboarding disaster? You need to stay back there. Just fate's death's misdirection. No, if death should come, he'd look his best, crevice as clean as a whistle. Get out of the basket. Yeah, it's gonna fall on you. I'm not doing that. You're doing that. Sorry, guys. My cat's trying to jump in my dirty clothes basket. Thus resolved, he'd sat on his Japanese toilet and evacuated his bowels, wiped himself, and hopped in the shower, thoroughly sponging the orifice, then drying and powdering himself. He moved to the vanity mirror and kept going, trimming his wiry eyebrows, plucking the wolf hairs from his ears, rubbing bronzer across his forehead, his neck, around his clavicles in a broad swoop, so he looked like a Grecian bust. Now he was ready for the boys at the morgue. Here was a great star, they'd say, a box office god of the kind they don't make anymore. Now he was marginally less afraid. He settled back into bed and began watching the first thing Netflix offered, Pompeii Reconstructed Countdown to Disaster. This was the Hamptons or Riviera of the ancient world, said the host, Ted Berman, an off-brand Indiana Jones in a thrift store fedora. Once again, Jim felt reality blurring into fiction as a digitally animated cloud of burning ash billowed up from Mount Vesuvius. I don't know. I'm butchering some words, sorry. The computerized notion of a camera's POV rose with it, high above the city, then stopped and panned into the volcanic crater, which suddenly seemed so very endless and all-devouring that Carrie cried out, "Security! Inventory!" "Internal zones clear," replied his house, in the voice of a Singaporean opium heiress who summered in Provence. "You are safe, Jim Carrey. Defense barrier status, fully electrified. Let's do a voltage surge, just to be sure." The television's light dimmed as he heard a sound like a giant zipper being pulled around the property, 20,000 volts of electricity surging through his razor wire fence. "Tell me I'm safe again," said Carrie, "and loved." "You are safe and loved. Tell me something nice about me." "Your monthly water usage is down 3%. Flatterer." The television regained brightness. The program resumed. An earthquake had just rocked Pompeii, a natural phenomenon that the Romans had never experienced. Some thought it was the first act of a miracle and stayed to see more. Others were less sure, fleeing through the city gates. "No one could have guessed," said Ted Berman, "that all who remained would die." A succession of desperate moments with the documentary's main characters, a shipping magnate and his pregnant wife, young sisters born into a brothel, a high-ranking magistrate, his family, and their African slave. Eyes tearing, Jim wondered, was it wise to keep watching Pompeii with the images of Megalodon still fresh on the brain? With those Neanderthal orphans still paused in their French cave? Charlie Kaufman once told him that cinema's guiding illusion of distinct frames affecting fluid continuity was the same trick that creates the impression of time in the mind, that past and present are invented concepts, necessary fictions. Excuse me. Were he and the Pompeiians just desperate squares of celluloid? Were they feeling the collapse of his world just as he was feeling the destruction of theirs? Was there only one pain? If this was true, then it must hold not only for the original Pompeiians, but for the actors playing them, people struggling for the next job, to be seen, to matter. Money was in charge now. Money had made them all indentured dreamers. I don't have to be like this. I could leave right now and just be happy. But what would happy look like? At that moment, he couldn't remember. An awful grief pulled him deep into the bed, multiplying his every pound 1,000-fold. He summoned the strength to lift his thumbs and text Nicolas Cage, a man whose artistic bravery had always given him courage. "Nick, when you said the spirits of the dead are all around us, did you mean that poetically or truly?" But his exquisite friend did not answer. "Nick?" Again. Again, no reply. Seconds felt like loads of granite on top of him. He considered abandoning Netflix. He would eat the tuna Nicois in his refrigerator, then go outside and maybe play drown in the pool. He raised his head off the pillow, ready for action, but then stopped suddenly, sure that he owed Pompeii's dead a full and unbroken viewing. He pressed play. Sets of unearthed remains were being digitally reconstructed by archaeologists from Frankfurt, where Jim Carrey wondered, would this technology be when he was dug up? What would people of the future conclude about him? Could they ever guess at what had writhed within his skull? His flayed father? His sweet suffering mom? Might they one day reconstruct the ruins of the mind as well as those of the body? The skeletons of the two sisters found in the Pompeii brothel had malformed teeth, effects the researchers concluded of congenital syphilis. They were born with this social disease through no fault of their own, totally innocent and yet in constant pain. The girls now receive their close-up in a dramatized flashback, latex pustules bubbling off their eyelids as they gaze up toward Mount Vesuvius. In 1993, the guru Viswanathan had observed Carrie's aura as a glorious, radiant rose gold, and told him to sense its shiftings within his transient form. Now he felt it arcing out toward the television as the syphilis twins cowered beneath the volcanic ring. He feared his soul was being taken from him, or worse, that it was fleeing. Jovial affection, he tried to say, but could only gasp as, on the TV, Vesuvius's ash cloud blotted out the sun. Plunged into darkness with a new appreciation for the world's impossibility, Carrie finally managed to bark, "Affection!" And immediately the two Rottweilers clambered up to lie on either side of him, licking the tears from his beard. "Deep affection," cried Carrie, and the dogs, who had been trained to treat whoever spoke those words as a nursing mother and regard themselves as exactly 6 weeks old, moved from merely licking his face to nuzzling his neck, their muzzles so warm that Carrie might have confused the Pavlovian air for the true nurture, were it not for their steel teeth grazing the outline of its jugular. He looked back to the TV, a shot of human bones on a steel table. "Female remains," one of the Germans said. The camera zoomed in on a blue laser matrix completing the scan. A wealthy woman, perhaps 18 years old. The program cut to a flashback, the woman in her villa, dining on a silk couch, a delicate beauty wiping her husband's mouth with a kindness that Jim knew was drawn from the actress's own way of loving. The only truly selfless love he'd ever known, a giving without thought of taking, was with Linda Ronstadt in the rainy July of 1982. 16 years older, she'd seen him a Mexican love song, Vulgar, a yearning lullaby that would settle through him as she held him to her sun-browned chest, running her fingers through his hair. Vulvar. The words traveling forward through time to this moment. Come back, come back, come back. But how could he? He was not the bright-eyed boy she'd held. Had he killed that innocent kid, then dissolved the body in the acids of debauchery? He envied the doomed Pompeian man and his tender wife. He felt terribly alone there on the bed, Linda's voice whispering through him. Vulvar. As the laser matrix danced down the woman's skeleton, pausing over a set of bones scattered about beneath her rib cage, one of the Germans typed commands into his computer. On its screen, renderings of the bones gathered in a digital womb to form a tiny skeleton. A few more keystrokes gave it a shadeless layer of pink skin, a pair of tadpole eyes, a half-formed hand, a tiny finger plugged into a cupped mouth. "She is with child," said the German. "Boy child." And now new tears of abandoned hope joined Carrie's earlier tears of desolation. "The cloud of superheated ash is collapsing under its own weight," explained Ted Berman, "and while the woman and her husband were safe from falling pumice in their vaulted villa, they will now suffer Pompeii's worst fate, thermal shock. As the air temperature reaches 500 degrees, the woman's soft tissues will literally explode, her brain shattering her skull." "No," said Jim Carrey. "The baby's skull also explodes, perhaps a fraction of a second after the explosion of the mother's intestines through her rib cage." "Please don't," he begged. And then, across his billion-pixel screen, the volcanic plume collapsed beneath its own mass, cascading down the sides of the digital Vesuvius. The syphilis girls, the magistrate, the young lovers and their child, all of them in their dreams, carbonized. Flash assumed into the death cloud whose blackness darkened the Hummingbird Road bedroom as it rolled across the digital bay of Naples. Carrie moaned sorrow, closed his eyes like a little boy. When he opened them again, Ted Berman was walking Pompeii's excavated streets in the present day. The camera panned across rows of plaster cast bodies arrested in death, some with faces of abject terror, some guarding piled treasure with weapons, others tranquil, resigned. And finally, a husband and wife lying together, his hand on her pregnant stomach. And Jim Carrey, known for wild pratfalls and joyous mayhem, he curled into a ball and started weeping. Yes, he was a real mess, but once he had shone so brilliantly, oh, you should have seen him. So it sounds like Jim Carrey's going through like a really, really tough time right now. This is one of the new books. Yeah, it's copyright 2020. So, yeah, Jim Carrey's going through a lot right now. And that was just the prologue. So give me a couple minutes and I'm going to drink a little bit more of my coffee and watch at least 2 videos and then I'll get back to you guys. I do work at 2, so I'll be getting off here about 1-ish. So it'll be like an hour that you'll get reading with me. Follow me back next. Be right back. Alright, everybody, so I'm back. Yes, I did my hair, I did my makeup. Let's see. Looks pretty good to me. Anyway, hair, makeup, painted my nails orange for, spooky spirit. And we're gonna go ahead and get into Follow Me Back by A.V. Geiger. I'm 9 pages in, but we'll just go ahead and restart. I also only have about 45, maybe 50 minutes. So, the interrogation, fragment 1, December 31st, 2016, 8:42 p.m., case number 124.678.21-001, official transcription of police interview, start page 1, investigator. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Thorne. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Where's Tessa? I am Lieutenant Charles Foster. This is Detective Terrence Newman. For the record, today is December 31st at 8:42 p.m. This interview is being recorded. Is she here? Is she in the building? Okay, sorry about that. Where was I? Mr. Thorne, please sit down. This is an ongoing criminal investigation. Tell me where she is. We can't discuss that until we've taken your statement. She's safe though, right? Will you tell me that much? Son, the sooner you cooperate, the sooner we'll get this whole thing sorted out. Okay. What do you want to know? Thank you. Please state your full name, date of birth, and occupation for the record. Eric Taylor Thorne, date of birth, March 18th, 1998. What was the third thing? Occupation. I don't know. I don't even know anymore. Take your pick. Singer, songwriter, actor, underwear model, professional media whore. Does that qualify as an occupation? That's fine, Mr. Thorne. Take it easy. This should only take a few minutes. Should I have a lawyer? You have the right to call an attorney at any time. Am I under arrest? We just have some questions. As I said, the sooner we have your statement, the sooner... Okay, forget it. Tell me what you want to know. Let's start at the beginning. The beginning. What's the beginning? The day I got my record deal? The day I first picked up a guitar? I was about 4 years old. We're talking about Tessa Hart. Tell us how you and Miss Hart first became involved. Over Twitter last summer. I think it was sometime in August. It started before that, though, before I even set up the account. Please continue. I guess if you have to start the story somewhere, I'd say the whole thing actually started in June with Dorian Cromwell, from the boy band. Are you saying this case is connected to what happened to Dorian Cromwell? No, not really. Sorry, I'm not making any sense. I just meant the story was all over the news, and then the trial with that messed up girl, all because he followed her back. I'm afraid I'm still not following. How does the Dorian Cromwell case relate to your relationship with Tessa Hart? It's funny. I knew at the moment I heard the story. I knew in my gut what must have happened to him. People say they'll always remember where they were when Kennedy was shot, or where they were on 9/11. That's kind of how it was for me. I was driving down the Santa Monica freeway with the top down, listening to the top 40 on the radio, and the announcer broke in right in the middle of number 12. I wasn't even paying attention, but that was weird. It was something big because I stopped in the middle of the song. Sorry. They didn't know exactly what had happened yet. It took a few days to get to the bottom of it, about that girl, that fan. They didn't even know for sure it was a murder at that point. They only knew that it was Dorian Cromwell. That's what they said. Those were the exact words. Dorian Cromwell, lead singer of Fourth Dimension, was found dead this morning in London, floating face down in the Thames. 1. Projecting. August 12, 2016. You're not obsessed. You're projecting. Projecting? Tessa looked up from the thick coil of long brown hair that she'd been braiding and unbraiding for the past half hour. She met eyes uncertainly with her psychotherapist, Dr. Reagan, sitting on the other side of the bedroom. It's a common defense mechanism, Dr. Reagan said. Her tone remained emotionless as usual, the human equivalent of a white noise machine, but she shifted uncomfortably as she spoke. She sat perched in a low-slung pink beanbag chair with her legs crossed at the ankles, striving to maintain a professional demeanor. Normally, she only met with clients in her office, but she made an exception for Tessa. Tessa's gaze dropped to the older woman's pantyhose, bunching at the knees, and she couldn't help but feel a grudging admiration. It took serious mental fortitude to brave the heart of the West Texas summer dressed in nylons. Tessa herself wore nothing but a tank top and cotton sleeve shorts that barely skimmed the tops of her slender thighs. Projection. We use that term when an individual takes her own thoughts and feelings and attributes them to another person. In your case, to a celebrity. I'm sorry, if you hear my cat in the background, she's going freaking bonkers right now. But I've never met Eric Thorne. I've never even been to one of his concerts. Dr. Reagan picked up Tessa's thought journal and flipped to the beginning. She made no comment on the drawing scribbled across the cover, a hodgepodge of hearts, woodland creatures, and eyeless human faces. Forget projection, Tessa thought, wrinkling her nose. They should probably discuss the fact that she couldn't even stand her own doodle people looking at her. Dr. Reagan indicated one of Tessa's early entries. Tell me about this. What piqued your interest enough to write something down about him? About Eric? Tessa reached for the spiral-bound journal, and her eyes swept over the page. I was watching TMZ, I guess. They caught him walking around New York City with some actress from Pretty Little Liars, so naturally they assumed he was dating her. But that's not what you wrote down. Of course not. Have you seen TMZ? It's like fan fiction, but less believable. One of Dr. Reagan's brows corked upward, the closest she ever came to real facial expression. She paused, her horn-rimmed glasses up her nose. Tell me what you wrote instead. Tessa pulled her knees against her chest. She felt a vague unease as she remembered how the grainy paparazzi... Will you knock it off, you frickin' psycho? Grainy paparazzi footage had held her transfixed. Eric and that girl. He hadn't looked like he was on a date, not even close. The video showed him walking briskly with a furtive glance over his shoulder as he picked up the pace. Then the camera zoomed in close. Those piercing blue eyes of his had looked straight out of the screen, and the look on his face. He didn't look like some happy guy with a new girlfriend. Not to me. What did he look like to you? Tessa closed her eyes. Like he was scared out of his mind? Good, Tessa, Dr. Reagan rewarded her with a nod. And what do you think that might say about your own state of mind? You mean I just imagined it? I'm actually the one who's scared out of my mind? Dr. Reagan leaned forward intently. She tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear. I suppose that's possible. That's one of my worst fears, I guess. Walking around some crowded city sidewalk, not knowing if I'm being followed. Dr. Reagan took the thought journal and flipped it close. Excellent. Keep going. It wasn't just that one time, though, Tessa said, thinking aloud. Every time he looks straight into the camera, you can see this glimmer of fear. Fear of what? Like he feels haunted by something. Haunted or... Tessa broke off, searching for the right word. Her eyes slid over the journal cover and landed on one of the baby deer she'd drawn, running for its life. Hunted, maybe? I don't know. That's very interesting, Tessa. Really? It's interesting? Tessa couldn't help but laugh. Interesting. That must be one of those obscure psych terms for when the patient has a total one-track mind. Every time she sat down to do her mindfulness exercises, she just ended up writing stories about Eric Thorne. Tessa had already filled 2 whole journals with all of the elaborate plots she'd imagined. It can't be healthy, right? Dr. Reagan pulled out a yellow legal pad and recorded a quick note. You may feel safer exploring your own anxieties by assigning them to someone else. That can be quite useful, actually, as long as you recognize what you're doing. Try to think how your theories about the celebrity might connect to what happened in June. Tessa responded with a choked noise, hugging her knees even tighter. She spent the month of June in New Orleans, part of an 8-week creative writing program for teens, or it was supposed to last 8 weeks at any rate. Tessa had left the program halfway through and fled back home to the safety of her childhood bedroom. Now the whole summer had nearly come and gone, and she still couldn't bring herself to talk about why she'd left. No, you said I didn't have to. Not until I was ready. Okay, Tessa, remember, you're breathing. That's it. Tessa swallowed. The rising anxiety threatened to engulf her, but she focused her mind on her one most trusted distraction, Eric. Eric Thorne. Tessa chanted his name inside her head as she sucked air deep into her lungs. She was supposed to hold her breath for a 5 count, but she had her own little spin on this particular relaxation technique. Eric 1, Eric 2, Eric 3. Tessa watched her chest slowly rise and fall until the tension in her shoulders ebbed. Good, Tessa. We can keep the conversation framed on Eric Thorne if that's where you feel most comfortable. I just don't understand why I chose him. Why Eric Thorne of all people? You tell me. Why do you think you fixated on him? Tessa felt her face heat up. She'd considered herself a fan since his debut album a few years ago, but her fascination lately had reached a whole new level. It went way beyond the stories in her thought journal. Every time she came across a new picture of him, she felt this overwhelming compulsion to save it to her cell phone camera roll. She had more images of Eric Thorne squirreled away than anyone she'd ever known in real life. Here in her bedroom, Tessa had taken down all the other photographs that used to decorate the pale yellow walls, but she'd left her Eric Thorne concert poster in its place of honor above her bed. I don't know, maybe because he's hot? She glanced over her shoulder at the poster and her eyes lingered on the familiar scene. Eric performing on stage with an electric guitar slung across the sculpted muscles of his chest. He had his head thrown back, eyes closed, lost in the music. Dr. Reagan peered over the rim of her glasses at Eric's sweaty torso. I'm guessing there's a little more to it than that. But let's leave it as something for you to think about for our next session. Now, what about your desensitization exercises? How did it go this week? Tessa bit at her thumbnail, already chewed down to the nub. Her therapist filled the silence as she hesitated. Last week you were able to sit downstairs in the living room with your mom and your boyfriend, Scott, for half an hour. Yeah, Tessa muttered. And your goal for this week was to try touching the front doorknob of the house. That didn't exactly happen. Tessa spit down on her cuticle, tearing it with her teeth. She knew that she'd messed up. It had taken her more than a month of therapy just to summon the courage to set foot outside her bedroom door, but the past few days had felt like a huge step backward. I've just been really overwhelmed this week. There's this thing happening. It's stupid. What thing? Nothing. It's just something that happened on Twitter. The therapist stopped scribbling notes and looked up. You're on Twitter? I'm really sorry, Tessa said. She hadn't mentioned her Twitter account before. It hadn't seemed relevant. She rarely ever tweeted nowadays, but this past week, Twitter had somehow managed to occupy most of her waking thoughts. I know what you're going to say. I should probably deactivate so I can focus on my exercises better. No, Tessa, that would only isolate you further. Any kind of social interaction could potentially hold a therapeutic value. Really? Tessa glanced skeptically at her phone resting on the bedside table in a red leather cell phone case. She left it there, face down, so she wouldn't be distracted by any new Twitter notifications during the hour-long session. Dr. Reagan nodded. Our goal is for you to interact with other people in the outside world, of course, but social media can serve as a positive first step. Okay, well, that's pretty much all I did all week. So, do you have followers? People with whom you interact? Tessa laughed. What a question. If anyone had asked her a few days ago, the answer would have been different. A couple hundred followers who mostly ignored her existence. But when Tessa last checked her account today, the follower count stood at 30K. Tessa still felt a little dizzy thinking of it. 30,000 followers. 30,000 sets of eyes watching her every tweet. Her emotions kept swinging back and forth like a pendulum, from terror at the thought of them all to an irrational desire for more. Her fingers itched to check her phone. Again, how many more had she gained in the time since she and Dr. Reagan started talking? It's kind of intense, she said as she picked up the phone and glanced down. Tessa H. at Tessa Hearts Eric, followers 30.1K. She showed the screen to her therapist. Very interesting. Dr. Reagan pressed her pen against her lips, considering. She wrote something else on her pad. My account kind of blew up this week. What happened? Tessa ducked her head. She avoided Dr. Reagan's gaze, fiddling with the frayed hem of her bedspread. It started with the story I've been writing, about Eric. I posted one online last weekend. Tessa watched a row of stitching come undone as she pulled at a loose thread. I called it Obsessed. It was supposed to be a little joke at my own expense, you know. And what happened? I started this hashtag Thorne obsessed. Do you know what a hashtag is? I'm familiar with the concept. Dr. Reagan's tone remained perfectly deadpan, but her eyes lit with amusement, and Tessa bit her lip. She generally assumed that anyone Dr. Reagan's age didn't even know how to download an app, but she must have misjudged her therapist. Tessa's mouth curved into a shy smile as she continued. I was trying to get other fans to read it, so I made all these tweets with sexy pictures of him and a link to my story, and it just blew up somehow. It happened so fast. First, one of the bigger Eric Thorne fan accounts retweeted me, and then at Relatable retweeted, and then at Flirtationship retweeted, and then I forget after that. I think it was at Girl Post or maybe at So Damn True, one of those big accounts that everyone follows, and then it was everywhere after that. I think it hit number one on Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Look, Tessa swiped across the screen of her phone and held it out to Dr. Reagan again. See? These are all the hashtags trending worldwide. And there, still hovering third on the list, were the words Tessa had first typed into her phone 6 days ago, now amplified by more voices than she even dared to fathom. Hashtag Eric Thorne obsessed, 21.8 million tweets. I think I have time to do this next part. Maybe. Yeah, I should have time to do this next part. Chapter 2, hashtag Eric Thorne obsessed. Eric opened Twitter and pulled up the list of trending topics. Hashtag Eric Thorne obsessed, 21.8 million tweets. Shit, he swore softly, chucking his phone down on the bed beside him. Still third on the list. The damn thing refused to die. Couldn't all those stalker-ific parasites find anything better to obsess about? At least he wasn't first anymore. He slumped back against the velvet upholstered headboard of the hotel bed. A lock of his shaggy dark brown hair fell over his eyes, and he raked it away in annoyance, grimacing at the crunchy texture of leftover hair gel. He should have showered before turning in last night. He put in another 16-hour day of interviews yesterday, and he'd been too tired to do much more than kick off his clothes and pass out on top of the covers by the time he made it back to his hotel room. No point showering now anyway. His morning workout regimen began in 20 minutes, and his trainer would give him hell if he showed up late. Then again, his hairstylist would give him hell if he showed up in the makeup chair afterward with a tangle of sweaty, hair gel-caked disgustingness. Maybe he should hop in the shower just for a sec. A faint creak sounded from the other side of the bedroom door, and Eric paused, his spine stiffening. Someone was in his suite. Maid service? No, they knew better. Did he forget to turn the double before he passed out last night? But then it could only be. He shrank back against the pillows of the bedroom as the bedroom door knob turned. Who's there? His lips formed the shape of the words, but there wasn't enough air in his lungs to make a sound. He grabbed a bed sheet to cover himself, undressed except for yesterday's pair of boxer briefs, while his eyes made a quick scan of the room. Anything he could use as a weapon. Bedside lamp? No, just wall sconces in here. No ashtrays either. Shit. Maybe that ceramic vase over there. Hey kid, you decent? Eric squeezed his eyes shut at the sound of the familiar voice. He relaxed his death grip on the bedsheet and as his manager, Maury, sauntered into the room. Dude, Eric exclaimed, his heart fluttering like a caught bird inside his chest. You don't even knock anymore? Sorry, kid. Were you sleeping? Maury looked like he'd been up for hours. Eric couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his manager dressed in anything other than polished wingtip shoes and designer-labeled suits. The man deserved a GQ fashion spread. Probably could have landed one for himself if he hadn't been so short and fat and bald. No, I wasn't sleeping. That's not the point. This is my bedroom. Maury rolled his eyes appreciatively around the well-appointed room. Technically, this is a hotel suite paid for by your record label, he said, brushing a hand against the duvet cover. What is this, Egyptian cotton? Probably 800 thread count? Did you sleep cozy? His manager didn't bother to mention the room rate, and Eric knew better than to ask. So we're not even going to pretend I have privacy anymore? Maury poked a toe at the pile of dirty clothes that lay discarded on the hand-loomed carpeting. Maybe hang a sock on the door if you're gonna have a girl in here, he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Eric made no response. He punched his fist into one of the overstuffed pillows. Oh, come on, kid. Lighten up. It's a joke. You're hilarious, Maury. Relax. I'll knock next time. I promise. Thank you. Can I get dressed now? Eric clasped the bedsheet tighter around his shoulders, but his manager didn't take the hint. What? Is there something you needed? Mari reached for Eric's cell phone. Yeah, I just got off the horn with social media. The hashtag Eric Thorne Obsessed trend fell to number 3 overnight, so they want you to give it a little shot in the arm. No. Eric swatted the phone out of reach before his manager could get his paws on it. They just want you to do a little follow spree, Mari said. Follow a few fan accounts. You know the drill. Eric thought he might throw up. Seriously? Did those words seriously just come out of Mari's mouth? Didn't anyone at his record label watch the news? Eric buried his head in his hands. He knew he must sound like a broken record, the way he brought up the murder case on a daily basis, but he couldn't put the ugly story out of his mind. His manager's words had summoned up all the sordid details once again. A follow spree. Eric let out a low moan. Mari cast his eyes upward. Oh, for the love of God. Let me guess. Dorian Cromwell? Mari, don't you get it? That's exactly what happened to him. He did a follow spree. Kid, I understand. You're freaked out. But he followed some obsessed teenager and she got all carried away. Convinced herself that they were soulmates, star-crossed lovers, some bullshit like that. So she found out where he was staying and waited for him to come out of his hotel. And when he didn't quite see it the same way, Eric tilted back his head and slashed a hand across his throat. Listen to me, kiddo. Mari shuffled over to the side of the bed and dropped a fatherly hand on Eric's shoulder. That girl had issues. You understand that, right? They locked her up. It was a 1 in a million thing. See, that would be a lot more reassuring if I didn't have 14 million Twitter followers. Eric. So, by that math, I only have 14 potential axe murderers following me. No big deal. Mari laughed. You need to stop watching the news, my friend, and maybe try showing your followers some gratitude. His manager reached again for the cell phone resting on the mattress. Here, Mari said, tapping at the phone. Do the follow spree. You can pick the fans yourself. You just have to include this one. Eric glanced at the Twitter account that Mari pulled up on the screen. Tessa H. at Tessa Hearts Eric. Followers 30.1k. Why her? Eric asked. He ran his eyes down her recent tweets, all various pictures of him shirtless, with a link to some website called Wattpad and the hashtag Eric Thorne Obsessed. She's the one who started the trend. She wrote a fanfic story about you called Obsessed. Oh, perfect. That sounds healthy. Mari waved away the sarcasm without taking his eyes off the screen. It's actually not half bad, as these things go. The label's thinking about publishing it and bundling it with the next deluxe album. Eric stuck a finger down his throat and pretended to gag. They're just keeping an eye on it for now, but if you follow her, that story will explode, which is exactly why I'm not doing it. Eric snatched the phone away. I'm not encouraging these people to be any more obsessed than they already are. Mari didn't answer. He merely shrugged and looked away, studying the tips of his shoes. Eric had worked with him long enough to know what the gesture meant. He could fume all he wanted, but when it came to the edicts of his record label, he didn't really have much choice. Eric pinched the bridge of his nose. He could feel a tension headache coming on. He'd been having them far too often lately, especially when his manager was in the room. Did the label get back to you yet about beefing up security? Let's just tackle one thing at a time, shall we? Did you even talk to them? Eric asked. Kid, you're their #1 earner. I promise you. They're not going to let you get hacked to bits by some serial killer. Just as long as your ticket sales don't slump. Eric rolled his eyes. Great, Mari. I'm so glad you're amused. Now, do you think you could knock it off with the bad stand-up routine? Whoa, big guy. Mari threw up his hands. I asked. They answered. And? In your liaison said yes, but then publicity got wind and nixed it. Publicity, Eric thought. He should have known. It always came down to those bottom feeders, didn't it? The geniuses at his record label didn't care if he ended up dead. No, they might consider it a stroke of luck. Look at Dorian Cromwell. Fourth Dimension had been starting to fade before it happened. Sales were soft on their latest album, but it had popped back up to the top of the charts the moment the murder story broke. The PR folks at Dorian's label probably all stood up and cheered when they heard the news. Probably started the hashtag RIP Dorian hashtag themselves, just to spur the feeding frenzy a little longer. No such thing as bad publicity, right? Eric clenched his jaw. There was no point trying to argue. He knew what the publicist would say, what Mari would say too. If Eric dared to voice a complaint that he should be flattered, he had the entire Twitterverse obsessed with him. Literally, he should take it as a compliment. Yeah, Eric thought, meeting Mari's eyes with a sullen glare. Dorian must have been super flattered right up to the moment that fangirl slit his throat. Just a little follow spree. You've done it a million times. Eric shook his head. Eric, if you don't do it, the label's going to take your Twitter account and let some publicist over there run it. Then you won't have any control at all. They can't do that, can they? You know what it says in your contract. Right, his contract. Eric folded his arms across his chest. Honestly, his manager had a lot of nerve bringing up the subject. Eric had been on Mari's case for months to renegotiate that sorry excuse for a record deal. Signing it in the first place was probably the biggest mistake of his career. Mari cleared his throat. I know what you're going to ask, Eric, and the answer is I'm trying. How much longer is it going to take? Mari didn't answer. He turned to straighten his tie in the gold-framed mirror that hung opposite the bed. For a moment, Eric thought he didn't hear the question, but Mari spoke in a confidential tone as he adjusted the points of his shirt collar. Listen to me, kid. They weren't born yesterday. Eric met his manager's eyes reflected in the glass. What does that mean? It means they realize you're not happy. They see what you're trying to do. As long as your parents are co-signers on that contract, they've got you by the balls. They'll wipe out your whole family's life savings just like that. Mari snapped his fingers for emphasis. If you try to walk away. But I'm not a minor anymore. I'm 18 years old. And you're almost out from under it. Mari raised a hand to silence him. Just hang in there a little longer. 2 more album cycles and you're free. You can go indie. You can retire. You can do anything you want. Oh, my hand. Eric's shoulders sagged. 3 years tops, Mari said. Maybe 2.5 if we hustle. Oh, so I'll get out early for good behavior? Mari laughed. If this is prison, kid, then sign me up. His eyes made another circuit around the opulent hotel suite. You wanted this, Eric. You worked your ass off to get discovered. Remember what happened to that pimply-faced kid I found posting cover songs on YouTube? I know, Mari. I just didn't totally understand what I was signing up for. Mari sat on the edge of the bed and punched him in the arm. Come on, get up. Go do your workout. You'll feel better. Then you can do the follow spree after that. Eric groaned at the reminder, his workout, as if he had any choice about that either. 3 hours a day of cardio and weights, overseen by the personal trainer of his record label's choosing. It was all right there in the contract. And lo and behold, pictures of his perfectly chiseled pecs and abs featured prominently in every one of those #Eric Thorne obsessed tweets. Fine. Just give me a few minutes to myself first. Can I have that at least? Of course. Mari stood and made his way toward the door. You smell like a zoo animal, by the way. Did you shower? Body odor isn't in the contract, Eric said dryly. He wrapped a sheet around himself, toga style, and followed his manager to the main door of the suite. Actually, it is, my friend, Mari said over his shoulder. I hate to break it to you. What? Since when? Personal hygiene clause. That's ridiculous. Like anyone can smell me over Twitter. Mari didn't answer. He already had his cell phone pressed to his ear, and he waved to Eric offhandedly as he made his way out. Eric poked his head out the front door of the suite and swept his eyes down the length of the corridor, empty except for a maid pushing a housekeeping cart. She spotted him, and Eric tensed as her eyes widened with recognition. A fan, he could tell, from the way her face flushed crimson. Eric looked away, praying she wouldn't make a fuss. She wouldn't scream, would she? Or worse yet, snap a cell phone video to sell to TMZ? But the maid lowered her gaze discreetly as she pushed the cart around the corner. Eric took a breath. For a moment he considered going after her. Maybe he should have offered to sign an autograph. He used to take such pleasure from little things like that. It only took a second of his time to make some fans' whole day. But that was all at the beginning of his career, back when his Twitter followers counted in the thousands, not the millions. Now he didn't dare leave the safety of his room. Anyone could be lying in wait around the corner. Publicists, photographers, 14-year-olds with knives. Eric hastily returned the Do Not Disturb sign to the door handle. He flipped a heavy deadbolt and checked it twice to make sure it was secure. Then he padded back toward the bathroom and turned on the shower. Personal hygiene clause, he muttered under his breath. He turned his phone back on as he stood waiting for the water to heat. Twitter app, trending topics. #Eric Thorne obsessed, 21.9 million tweets. In the half hour since he woke this morning, another 100,000 people had added their voices to the chorus. Jesus. This is insane, man. If I had more time, I would totally read you guys a whole nother, 5-6 pages, but it's already 12:54, and like I said, I have to work at 2, and I gotta either walk or grab a taxi, so I think I'm gonna walk. Yeah, I think I'm actually gonna walk today, so that means I have to get dressed and brush my teeth, finish my coffee, brush my teeth, get dressed, and then head out. So I will see you guys in the next one. Um, Next time I come and read to you, it'll be chapter 3, and I don't know how far we'll read in. So maybe tonight, maybe not. Not sure. It may be a little bit more difficult for me to get through these because I am starting doubles again. So that's going to be fun to get back into the fix 4, which means I'm going to have to go to bed earlier. And I don't get off till 10 anyways. I pull 9-hour shifts right now, sometimes 10-hour shifts because I don't usually get off until like 11:30, depending on who's working before me. So, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. I don't know when that's going to be, so I apologize, but I will go ahead and get this up for you and make sure that I don't get copyright. So, bye!